When it comes to stand-up mixers, there's basically two types. You have the KitchenAid, and then you have the not KitchenAid. So this one is it's called the Cuckoo. Um, I just bought this off Amazon. It's the Amazon choice, so you know it's got to be good. But in this video, we're basically going to be talking about generic brand mixers and how they compare to the KitchenAid. So this mixer, I saw a lot of mixers on Amazon that looked nearly identical. There's a bunch of generic mixers that you can find like this. I think they're probably all made in the same factory. They have different branding, but this is what we're going to be looking at. This is listed at 660 watts. This, from what I was able to find, is 500 watts. These are both 8 quarts. So on paper, they seem kind of similar. A big glaring difference is that this is about $170 on Amazon. And this, I think you can spend as much as like $600, maybe 700. This is a lot more than this. So what we're going to look at in this video, is it worth spending the extra money for the KitchenAid, or is a generic brand mixer good enough? So the first test I ran with this was making sugar cookies, and I ran the test side by side with the KitchenAid. Both mixers were about the same when it came to adding and mixing ingredients, and ultimately both mixers ended up giving me identical results with the cookies. They were basically the same with either mixer. The main difference, however, was that on this generic mixer, there's a larger gap between the bowl and the mixing attachment. And so what this resulted in was that I had to scrape the sides a lot more, and it ended up taking me more time to mix the dough. So in the second test I did, I made some pan de sal, which is like a Filipino bread thing that tastes really good. The main difference here is that the KitchenAid came with a dough hook. This generic mixer did not. So that was one difference. And I ended up going both with the paddle attachment. But in this clip, you can hear in the generic mixer, there's a lot of resistance against the motor. And you can see that the whole mixer is actually moving quite a bit. So this overall is probably one of the biggest differences with the KitchenAid. The KitchenAid just seems a lot more durable. So I went on and I tested a bunch of other things with this generic mixer. One thing I tested was cake batter. It mixed just fine, but I did have to scrape the bottom and the sides a couple of times to pull up some of the mix that the mixer attachment couldn't reach. I also made some frosting. Frosting took me a bit longer to start getting things mixed up. I was not able to beat just the butter like I usually do because the gap on the sides of this mixer. But eventually my frosting started mixing really well without me having to scrape much, and my frosting in fact turned out great. I also made divinity with this. It took me a lot longer to beat the eggs because the mixer couldn't really reach the eggs very well, but once it started beating and getting a little bit fluffier, I was eventually able to get the stiff peaks that I needed with the eggs, and after the eggs were beaten, everything else worked great, and I ended up with one of the best batches of divinity I've ever had. So that was quite nice. I also did whipped cream with this, and as long as you have enough cream, I mean, it's just, yeah, it's what you would expect. It makes whipped cream. Aside from the basic function of these mixers mixing, there are a couple of differences you'll notice. For one, this KitchenAid, it goes up and down like this. There are KitchenAids that go more like this. I actually, honestly, I prefer this just because it's easier to get the mixer out and put stuff in. Not a fan of this design. That being said, there are a lot of KitchenAids, I think the smaller ones, where you can tilt it back like this. The other thing is attaching the bowl. This bowl just kind of goes on, this bowl twists. I had some difficulties putting the bowl on a few times. Honestly, both of these mixers kind of annoy me with how the bowl is put on and how you put things in. I wouldn't say one is better than the other. Here are the main things that I see that are different between these two mixers. For one, as I've mentioned in this video so far, the gap between the mixing attachment and the bowl on here, it's wider on the generic mixer than it is on the KitchenAid. This actually makes a big difference. You end up scraping the sides a lot more on this. It just does not mix as well, especially when you don't have a lot of things in it. The other big difference with these two mixers is the quality. This is metal, this is heavy. This is plastic. It's got suction cups, but this is not. This is not heavy at all. That could be a good thing, it could be a bad thing. This is smaller as well, it's more compact, it's easier to lug around, but realistically, when it comes to quality, you can tell that the KitchenAid just has much better quality than this. I would expect this to last a lot longer than this. In fact, we bought this KitchenAid used, we got a good deal on it. I fully expect this to last the rest of my life. This, I suspect it would last a long time depending on what you use with it. As I've shown before, if you do like a heavy dough, the motor seems to struggle a bit. I think if you were doing that regularly, I bet something on this would give out, the motor would give. With KitchenAid, I just don't worry about it that much. Another thing to consider with these two mixers is if this ever does have a problem and break, the likelihood that you can find someone to fix it or find a replacement part is pretty low, whereas the KitchenAid, you're always going to be able to find replacement parts for a KitchenAid mixer. So the real question here is, should you ever get a generic mixer like this Cuckoo? Such a weird name. This Cuckoo mixer. Yeah, you know, honestly, if you're on a budget, this works. I mean, it does work. It works pretty well, in fact. You just kind of have to work with it a bit. You have to do some scraping, make sure that the quantity of whatever you put in there is high enough that it can actually mix. This works. It's so much cheaper than the KitchenAid. If you're on a budget, you can get this and you can fully expect it to work. The main thing I would say is if you plan on using a mixer regularly, and especially making heavy doughs like bread, I don't know if I could recommend this. I've never had it break on me, but I feel like this is definitely more likely to break than the KitchenAid. I've grown up with a KitchenAid. My mom had one growing up. I think we had it for like a million years and it's worked fine. P.S. I'm not a million years old. If you have the money for a KitchenAid and you want something that's going to last a long time, then probably go ahead with KitchenAid. Generic brand, fine for doing small things, fine if you're on a budget, fine if you're going to college and you just need something for like 3 or 4 years. This will work. I hope this video helped some. I'll post links below so you can see where to find these things on Amazon or other places and kind of compare prices and see for yourself what you think. If you enjoyed this video and you would like to see something similar where I compare two other devices, let me know what devices you'd like me to compare. I had fun making this video because it meant I got to cook and make divinity, so that's a bonus.